Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 3, Episode 3 of Titans. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So it opens with Dick digging up Jason's grave, and it's empty. And obviously informing the Titans, yeah, I saw what I saw, which then it's like, okay, maybe Bruce was out of his damn mind, so he didn't see what he saw. Then we start throwing out some thoughts like, Ra's al Ghul, and Dick was like, oh no, he's somewhere else. And I was like, wait, what's that supposed to mean? Like, is that supposed to be like a spiritual hell, or he's trapped in something? Or is it just like, is that supposed to reference like he's nowhere in Gotham for it to be a thing behind like Jason's resurrection? But I do like, because it's like when you go Gotham, you have to go Ra's al Ghul, because you're like, oh, I mean, obviously his ties to Bruce, but also like resurrecting in the DC universe, you use the alley, as I brought up, like a freaking Lazarus pit. Like, once again, I had brought up, we don't know what the status of the Lazarus pits are in this universe. I mean, once again, Arrow makes it that there's multiple. I don't know if that's typically most continuities where there's multiple. I know there's the one, but whatever the case may be. So that's kind of out of there. But it is the point of like, well, if Jason came back, do you think it can help with Donna? And it's just kind of, everyone kind of gets quiet because it's like, yeah. And he quickly changed the subject because it's like, well, because death has already hit this team before. Even before Donna, it was Aqualad. So it's like, right. So what do we... it's like kind of wishful thinking of like, yeah, it might have worked on Jason, but I think they don't want to get their hopes up because also we have no idea what Rachel's up to, potentially on Themyscira and everything. So, but it's a conversation about what to do about Jason, because it's like Dick and the rest of the team doesn't want to just like take him down, like he might be a villain and stuff like that. But Hank is always like, nah, like if it comes down to him or me, I'm going to choose me every time, essentially. So like, they're basically saying that he's going to have to be put down. And obviously, Dawn comes to him and be like, you need to kind of take it easy. Like, we're all trying to process the fact is that we're dealing with the fact is that Jason's back, because it's not like some random villain. Because that's the thing. Because, that was something Connor says later on. It's like, right, well, taking down bad guys, that's what the Titans do. But Gar adds in, like, but this is the first time we've ever had to hunt down one of our own. That's a harsh reality. And even Gar trying to reach out to Bruce, like, hey, like... finding out, trying to leave him a message, but he can't be contacted right now. And that was also something too, like, it's like, well, Bruce has, connections, so he could be responsible. But it's like, no, if Bruce knew that Jason was alive, he wouldn't have killed the Joker. So, but it's like, yeah, they're in a very complicated situation of, even Hank even saying this line, and I think it comes full circle in certain regards when he says like, and what about you? And she's like, when the time comes, like, do you even have to ask, like, when I, for a fact, when the time comes, I do what needs to be done, type of thing. So it's interesting how that comes full circle in certain regards. But, and I love how like Jason calls him up, and I was like, I figured this was an act. I was pretty sure it was an act, but there's still like a 30% part of me like, is he having like a mental breakdown? Because he's like, yeah, if you can't tell anyone else, like, don't tell Dick he's like a dick, he's going to try and kill me. It's like, which is like, Hank should have known, like, no, out of anyone on the team, I'm more likely to kill you. And the fact that you're choosing to call me, because he knew that he can push Jason better than he could anyone else. But it's also because, like, he knows, like, the thing is, like, Dick would try to talk him off the edge, but it's also, he knows this team, or at least, like, well enough to know, like, what moves to make to kind of, I mean, well, we also throw out the theory this episode that it's not just him. That is like, right, there's too much organization. Like, Jason's not an idiot, but he's not like the thinking type. He's always like, he's like Hank, punch first, ask questions later. He's always like bull your way through, like, type of mentality. It's like thinking, like, maneuvering chess player Jason Todd. I mean, he was looking into some scientific stuff, but that's probably because someone else might have pointed him in the right direction. Maybe it has something to do with that. Like, I don't know if he went full-blown limitless with that concoction he was popping. My immediate thought is the person behind all this, probably Scarecrow. He's probably pulling a little bit, because I thrown it out there. I figured he'd throw out, like, do like a Hannibal Lecter where he gets free by the end of the season or something and runs amok in Gotham. But also it's like the conversation about fear and stuff like that has been a recurring theme, like, across all 3 episodes. And I'm like, it has to be him. Because he was even later on, Jason's like, oh, grow up, kind of get over, there's nothing to be afraid of or face your fears. Like, no, like, yeah, face your fears, like Batman did. Like, Batman didn't give in to fear. And that's the whole point of, like, he raises them forges them to not give in to fear either. And I'm like, well, there's one megalomaniac that exists in this city. I mean, I'm sure there might be others, but he's the number one I think of when it comes to fear, because I can't discount there might be other villains in the DC universe, but Gotham-based that deal with fear, there might still be others, but Scarecrow's number one. So I'm like, this has to be a manipulation. This has to be the good old Kansas shuffle. You know, obviously that's always how I metaphorically represent it, but obviously it's just, you know, the illusionary magician thing of like, oh, you're so busy looking at what the left hand's doing, you're missing all the stuff that the right hand's doing. And like I said, the Kansas City shuffle. I reference that way too much when it comes to that metaphor. Damn you, lucky number 11. I love that movie. I want to sit back and rewatch that movie. I know the twists and turns so much, but I love that movie. I've seen that movie like a dozen times. It's been a couple years since I've seen it. I should sit down and watch it and track it down and see if it's on any streaming services. Yada, yada, yada. Shut up, me. Sorry. But that's where I'm immediately like, it seems like you're definitely aiming towards it being Scarecrow, not unless it isn't, but and he's kind of my number one suspect right now, being the one behind him. I mean, obviously we see he's got the mind for it and everything. I even love later on be like, oh, Dick, Grayson, where you going? Oh, buddy, old pal, you just got here. It's just like, I'm like, yeah, they're waiting for their big twist with that. But I think he's the number one dude for this. But regardless, Hank is the one that goes to meet Jason. Like I said, Jason was like freaking out. That's why I was like I said, I wasn't sure if it was like, I was like 70% sure he was faking it, but 30% of me is like, I don't know, man. Maybe he's just, maybe he is legit having a mental breakdown. He's like, I didn't realize what I'm doing. I'm like, that felt, yeah, fake. But especially when he starts leading Hank on a goose chase, you're like, oh yeah, this is super fake. And just being like, oh, driving around, have to destroy his phone, then like get to that pool and like, oh, strip. He's like, yeah, you want me to go? Yep. Want you to strip down to swim to the other side. I was expecting him to electrocute Hank. I wasn't expecting him to like to knock him out and then implant a bomb on his chest. And the biggest like, because what ends up happening later on when they end up like once again, I forgot like, right. This is a continuity where Connor is half Lex Luthor, half Superman. So like he's on that genius level stuff. And the moment he started doing it, I was like, all right, I forgot. Because obviously, once again, like, I talked about it last season, but if you're unaware, there are continuities like Young Justice where he isn't half Lex Luthor. That's typically an older Superboy continuity where he's like half Lex Luthor, half Clark Kent. In most, I think more modern stuff, he typically ends up being what he is in Young Justice. Half like a different species, half Clark Kent type of situation, so... But I really appreciate, obviously, this being the episode, he really gets to flex that Lex Luthor side of things, being like examining it so that basically if any tampering from this device, it blows. It's also set not necessarily to a regular timer. It's set to the beats per minute. So every beep in his heart counts down the timer. I was like, that's a very intricate and super mad scientist, like... super villain approach to things. It can't be a regular timer. It has to be a timer that clicks down for every beat of your heart. That's interesting. So, and I just love Hank being like, that fucking little shit. You know? It's like, oh boy. So now, obviously, they're having to decide like what they're going to do about this, how they're going to approach this. Because he's willing to give you the deactivator, but you need to rob a truck of like gold bars, which Dick is like, no, because he knows exactly what he's doing. It's like, you want us to, you know, strip away our hero-ness by being, because they've already gained a reputation of being the Titans. They come into Gotham, do some criminal stuff. It's like he wants the entire city to like turn against them, to tear them down. It's like, oh, you've been on that pedestal a little too long. Time for the entire city to tear you down. He even said it last episode, like, when you they'll come, I'm the one they'll run to when you let them down. And it's like, oh God. Also, I didn't mention it, but I do appreciate the modulation on his voice. Once again, I think that's such an interesting development that they've decided to kind of go down that route. With because obviously it's always been the whole like, oh, changing your voice type of thing. Obviously the most extreme version being the Christian Bale thing, but I've always appreciated the more modified voice. Like, it's not something you like. Obviously this is referencing him, but obviously it plays a role in just kind of keeping his identity, but also it's just an interesting bat and superhero thing that comes up sometimes in the DC universe. Doesn't always come up, but nevertheless. But Don's kind of like, whoa, we're not going to just rob him. And Dick's like, no, we're not going to do that. It's like, wait, you're like, so you're choosing to save Jason over Hank? And he's like, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. We can do, like, let's do both. But, you know, I think for Dawn is like, yeah, Jason's already drawn the sand lines in the sand. So it's so interesting because she was kind of like, let's, have time to process this. It's like, oh, you're trying to kill the man I love? Nah, fuck you. You're going down. I choose him over you anytime. So it's kind of interesting how like she kind of shifted her tune a little bit, but it's still the hard process of like, right, you are one of us, but regardless, you're trying to kill one of us now. So that kind of changes everything. So Dick sends Corey to go talk to Barbara, which during the process, like, Corey recognizes something. It's like a blue aura comes over and it's like someone calling out to her, and you're like, is that supposed to be your sister? Something else? Is that someone like from Tamarin trying to like warn her about Black Star being on Earth or some shape or form? Because they still haven't crossed paths, even though like we saw in the season 2 finale, like Stinger, that she's here on Earth. So maybe it's kind of related to that in some shape or form. But obviously we see the guy that snuck in there and stole Jason's body. It was like a 4-minute time period because obviously the camera was kind of deactivated at the back side of things. So Barbara's kind of pretty stubborn. It's so interesting to a certain extent that she's kind of, it's because of everything going on, it's interesting that she's kind of got the anti-vigilante like thing going on, which is so interesting considering your dad was all about it. But I guess accepting help from the Titans because they've kind of screwed the pooch. It's like, my dad worked with Batman. It's like, there's us, but there's Batman. And it's like, it's different from like the runts of the, the Bat family kind of, one of the runts running off and starting his own squad, So, you have at the same time, well, because ultimately, Dick ended up visiting, Scarecrow, and he basically informs him like, okay, that this is a son trying to outshine his father using his own like tools or whatever. And that's what got, because like no matter what records they looked through, they couldn't find the very mechanics of this bomb until they realized like it's Wayne tech. The one inside of Hank is the prototype, so there's only one deactivator. So he's leaving it up to Connor to make one, and it's like, wait, you want me to make one in like 3 hours? It's like, yep, get on it. And Gar's like, don't worry, you got this. And I love like using his super speed and he's testing it out. It's like, right, I got to get this failure rate down to 0 because it's bouncing all over the place. It's like 87 at one point, and then it's like 62. Then it's back to 81%. It's like, got to get it as close to 0, rather at 0, because like any window of, if it ain't exactly 0, it leaves enough of that point. That 1% is enough to send it off of like, oh, you didn't fully deactivate it, and it needs to be completely deactivated so it's not an issue. But obviously for at the entire time this is happening, Hank is beating himself up for getting caught off guard like this. And I love the whole thing between him and Dawn. And he's like, oh, like, you're up here trying to make excuses so you can get inside the bed and get into bed with me. And she's like, save your fantasies about like an orgy for another time. And he is like, I mean, he's like, who says orgies aren't very calming or whatever. But it is that problem where it's like, right, we don't know if this is going to be it. He's trying to say what he's trying to say. But she's like, no, don't. Because I was about to say, like, you guys about to do it would probably like hinder this situation by making his heart rate increase. But it is that thing of just like, you never realize like how much time is wasted until like when you literally have the clock ticking down on you. Like, I don't, like all this time, like I wasted and screwed up, and like here we are with just so little time, but Dawn's kind of hopeful that things will turn around, and but Dick won't like go down the route of like, oh, let's steal that. It's like, no, but the moment you see that look on Dawn's face, you're like, she's going to do it. Granted, it wasn't publicly, but it's still enough to be like, man, Dove like kicked our ass and stole gold from us. So regardless if it was, I mean, sure, there's probably security cameras around because Jason still wanted it enough publicly. How about to say, couldn't you pretend to be someone else to do it? But I'm like, kind of like Daredevil, like, oh, like, black suited up, but I'm like, no, like he wants it to be a public thing. He wants to destroy your reputation. Granted, she was the only one that did it, but that still kind of sucks. I even love the bits between Gar and Hank, like that whole like Garfield, like the whole like sailor like bit they had between each other, and it's like he's like, why did we even come to Gotham in the first place? Is kind of what he's unsure of at this point in time, and Hank, he's like, yeah, I'm an idiot. I'm in love with Dawn. So, you're going to do stupid stuff when you're in love. I kind of don't learn my lesson. So, but for him, it's like his biggest regret. It's like, I should have never given up the suit, because you don't turn your back on your family. And like, that's what this is. This whole team isn't just a team. It's a family. And I kind of turned my back the moment I pulled up the suit, And yeah, I was dealing with stuff, but I still should never, especially because they went through so much trouble. That was even a conversation later on, like him and Dick are having their conversation. And I thought that was so, like I said, like, especially after the last episode where I was like, oh, look at them being so buddy-buddy. Like, they're on good terms. Like, they had their mixed issues in the past, but them to be in a good spot now. And then Hank is like, this kind of don't fall on you. Like, the fact of the matter is, I know you're doing your best for me, despite, like, me not always deserving it, essentially. And he's like, no matter what happens to me, don't let me be the reason why the Titans fall apart. This is a family. Don't let it fall apart because of me, And he's just like, I might not be around for the pizza. And Dick's like, I'll order it. He's like, yeah, this, like, a very specific way. He's like, hot coming in, hot coming out. And before Dick could say anything else, Hank hung up. It's like, oh, dude. And even Crypto being by his side the entire time. It's just like, and Connor's just working tirelessly to, like, work through everything to figure out a way to, deactivate the device. And so when Dick had tracked down the dude who actually took Jason's body, dude got flung from the roof because Jason basically killed him. And it's like, okay, I guess he was in a position where it's like, oh, he's dangling, and it's just like, if he doesn't keep a certain balance, he's going to fall to his death type of thing. I don't know. It was just kind of, he fell to his death and died. Not unless he was already dead, but I'm assuming like the impact is what killed him. So it's like, right, he seemed like he was a guy that snuck the body out, but maybe that was another diversion, making it seem like he was a ward. Or maybe it's just kind of like, hey, he was a sacrifice. Like, he was meant to be a loose end to send you over here just so you have less time. Like, everything is super calculated to know, like, how much time, Hank has left. So, and ultimately, Dawn shows up, and it's like, right, the deactivator, it's right here in my hand. All you have to do is kill me. So, kill me, you're saving Hank. That's all you gotta do is pull the trigger. But despite everything, she still couldn't immediately pull the trigger because she had her reservations. Which, I even love Jason being like, oh, who invited him? Which is like complete another BS. You invited him on purpose because you wanted it to be a situation where, like, it didn't happen much, but they were fighting over the gun for a little bit. I was like, that's kind of what you wanted them kind of at each other's throat, wasting more time. And Dick kept trying to be like, no, we'll find another way to save Hank. You don't have to do this. And it's like, right here in front of her is a surefire way of doing it, of ending this and saving Hank, And even, when Corey came in, he was like, you got to get out of here. Take Crypto with you. And he's like, tell Dawn I love her. And I was like, oh, come on. I was like, please. I was like, will they really do this? I was like, I don't know, man. I was like, please don't do it. Like, because even Hank saying, like, I've got, like, too much life to, I've got too much I got to do. I got, he was saying that to Gar, where it's like, I've got too much life to live. There's still so much I got to do. Same thing for you. Like, you guys, like, save me. And he's saying all that, but the moment Gar leaves, he's kind of frowning because he knows there's a strong possibility he wasn't going to make it out of this. And this, the sad thing is, at the end of the day, just when Connor got it, below zero was like, go, and he's running, and before he could, Dawn pulled the trigger, and I figured it was kind of a thing of like, pull the trigger and shoot me, but the moment like my heart stops beating or something, that's when it activates. Didn't even think about the gun itself being the deactivator. I figured he was the deactivator. He was the activator, so like the moment you try to shoot him and kill him, like the moment his heart stops beating for a little bit or whatever, it's enough to send the device into overdrive and act. Like, I thought something of that nature. Like, I figured it wouldn't kill him. I thought the whole point would be to try and resuscitate him, but it'd be too late by then or something. But it's like, no, it makes more sense for the gun to be the activator and for Dawn to be the one to pull the trigger. And Hank, and it's just like, the moment I was like, please, Connor, get there in time, get there, and he does it. I was like, no. And it's like, once again, I talked about it. I know a lot of people didn't like Batman v Superman. I did, but I honestly, the courtroom thing, when Clark's in the middle of that explosion of fire, like, being the Man of Steel, being the god that he is, the fire can't affect him. He's just standing there in the middle of it, just like everything's moving so slowly. Like, I legitimately think that's one of like an amazing, like, from a cinematography standpoint, just like that scene. Like, I think that's so dope, and it's a little reflected in this. But I'm like, that's so hard because the way Connor was there, I was almost like, I don't think they were. I knew they weren't going to show it, but I was like, there's a possibility they could show like him, like, very similar to Huey's girlfriend in The Boys, like how A-Train ran through her and like her viscera was like floating in midair for a while. Like I thought we'd see something like that, but I'm glad they didn't. And it's just the thing of like that moment of just like it's happening so slowly, and it's just like you're not affected by the flame. And in that moment, like at the end of it all, Crypto comes out. You're just like, oh. But to me, what's even like, it's just like, I like the fact this Crypto stayed by his side like the entire time. Because even Crypto, he's like, oh, find me some hot dogs or something. And Crypto goes off, like, he vision me up some hot dogs. And find me some bourbon, and he barks. And I love that whole thing of like, yeah, like, if I go to heaven, I'm like, Alfred, I'm gonna let him know he's got some competition. And she's like, you're not gonna see Alfred. Well, you think Alfred's in hell? No, you think I'm going to hell? It's like, no, you're not going anywhere. But that's what I was saying. Like, it's interesting, like full circle, like the whole, her saying like, hey, like I'm going to be like, kind of like when it comes time, I'll get it. I'll do what needs to be done. And because she was so desperate to save him, she ended up being the one that killed him. And that is going to break her to know that like, she will never forgive herself for that. Being like, I'm the one, like if I listen to Dick and like, I fell right into Jason's trap, and that she's sure as hell never going to forgive Jason for this. None of them will, because it's like, you crossed the line. You killed one of us. You killed a friend. Like, this wasn't some stranger, which is already bad enough to plenty of people you're responsible for death, but like, this is someone you knew who fought by your side. You did this, you know? And just Corey rushing to Gar, hugging him, and it's just like the reality sinking into all of them, and it's just like, that is just a heartbreaking and super depressing note to end this on. Like, man, they hit you with it. Like, they gave you these 3 episodes, and for this to be the episode that's like, yep, you SOBs, you have to wait till next week. It's like, oh, come on. It's like, oh, dude, that's so damn depressing, man. I'm so interested to see where the next episode takes us after this. Like, man, it's one blow after another. Because once again, the sad thing is this, you know, because Gar even said, it's like, why are we here? Like, this is Batman's issue, his problem, and yet we're the ones here trying to solve it. So the argument could be like, if Dick had never brought them to Gotham, which even Barbara was like, are you sure you want to do that? And it's like, so regardless of everything, you know, Dick is probably going to feel guilty about this as well, because it's like, I brought the Titans here. I put us in this position. But, you know, once again, he has to remember also what Hank said of like, no, like, keep this family together. Don't let this tear us apart. And once again, Dawn's not going to forgive herself. So it's like, everyone's going to have guilt, because Connor's going to be like, if I had just gotten there faster, if I'd done something, like, all of them are going to feel guilty because like, we weren't able to save Hank, you know? And it's just like I said, that's just heart-wrenching, you know, and sucks, you know? Like I said, I'm really interested to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.